Hey guys, tonight, we're not just going to drift off into the cosmos. We're going to journey back in time, way back to ancient China. Imagine yourself standing under an inky black sky, not a single city light polluting the view, just the raw, unadulterated brilliance of 1,000, no, 1,000,000 stars blazing down. You feel the cool night air on your skin. Perhaps a gentle breeze rustles through unseen bamboo, and the only sounds are the chirping of crickets and the quiet beat of your own heart. Up there in that vast cosmic tapestry, early Chinese astronomers, or perhaps more accurately, proto-astronomers, saw not just pinpricks of light, but a celestial bureaucracy, a mirror of their earthly empire. They weren't just stargazing for fun, mind you. Their very survival, their understanding of the world, and the legitimacy of their rulers depended on what they saw. And let's be honest, staring into that pre-industrial night sky, you'd probably feel pretty small, pretty insignificant, and maybe just a tad bit overwhelmed by the sheer terrifying immensity of it all. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes out there without your phone, let alone decipher the heavens. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing there feeling the dust beneath your bare feet, gazing up at a sky that modern eyes can barely comprehend. This wasn't leisure for them. It was life. Early Chinese societies, much like many ancient civilizations, were deeply attuned to the natural world. They lived by the rhythms of the seasons dictated by the sun's passage and the moon's phases. But it wasn't just practical agriculture that drew their eyes skyward. There was a profound sense that the heavens held secrets, messages, and even judgments. Think about it, a world without artificial light, where the moon truly ruled the night, where the Milky Way was a glowing river of stars, not a faint smudge. Every meteor streak, every planet's slow wander, every subtle shift in the constellations was a phenomenon demanding attention. These weren't just pretty lights. They were omens, guides, and the very breath of the cosmos itself. One mainstream historical fact to anchor us: the earliest recorded astronomical observations in China date back to the Shang dynasty, around 1600–1046 BCE, often found inscribed on oracle bones. These aren't fancy scientific treatises, but rather divinatory texts where questions were posed to ancestors or deities, and the answers etched onto turtle plastrons or ox scapulae. Among these questions you find queries about eclipses, the appearance of new stars, or unusual planetary alignments. This immediately tells you that celestial events were considered significant enough to warrant divine consultation, directly impacting the well-being of the king and his realm. It's a far cry from, "Is it going to rain tomorrow?" to "Will the sun's devourment by a mythical beast lead to my downfall?" Now for a quirky tidbit, one of the earliest celestial maps might have been found on a silk painting from the Mawangdui Han tomb, dating to the 2nd century BCE. It depicts constellations and planetary positions, but here's the twist. It's not strictly a scientific map for navigation. Instead, it's believed to be part of a funeral banner, possibly guiding the deceased soul through the cosmos, suggesting a blend of astronomical knowledge and deep spiritual belief. Imagine commissioning a map of the afterlife, that also happens to be astronomically accurate, just in case your soul needed to take a detour past Jupiter. Historians still argue whether these initial observations were purely for astrological divination, or if there was an underlying, albeit nascent, scientific curiosity driving the meticulous record-keeping. Was it simply fear of the unknown, or a genuine desire to understand the mechanics of the universe? It's a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Did the omens lead to observation, or did observation by revealing patterns suggest the idea of omens? You can almost hear the ancient scholar squinting at a particularly stubborn comet, muttering, "Is this a sign of imperial misfortune, or just a really big rock?" Either way, what's clear is that the sky was not just a backdrop. It was an active participant in the unfolding drama of human existence. They were building brick by celestial brick, a profound connection between the terrestrial and the cosmic, setting the stage for what would become one of the most sophisticated astronomical traditions in the ancient world. So you've got these ancient folks staring at the sky, not just because it's pretty, but because it's profoundly meaningful. And nowhere was this meaning more formalized, more deeply ingrained than in the concept of the mandate of heaven Tianming. This wasn't just a nice idea. It was the bedrock of imperial legitimacy in China for millennia, essentially granting the emperor the divine right to rule. But here's the catch. This wasn't a blank check from the cosmos. The mandate wasn't hereditary in the sense of an unbreakable lineage. It was conditional. If the emperor was a good ruler, benevolent and wise, if he maintained harmony between heaven and earth, then the heavens smiled upon him. But if he became tyrannical, corrupt, or incompetent, if natural disasters plagued the land, then the mandate could be withdrawn. And guess what? The most dramatic, undeniable signs of celestial displeasure were, you guessed it, celestial phenomena. Imagine you're the emperor sitting on your dragon throne, enjoying a nice cup of tea, when suddenly a massive comet streaks across the sky, visible even in the daytime. Or worse, the sun, your very symbol of power, is swallowed whole by an unseen beast during an eclipse. The whispers would start immediately. The astrologers and court diviners would be called in, frantically interpreting the signs. Was this a warning? A prelude to rebellion? A sign that the dynasty was losing heaven's favor? This wasn't just palace intrigue. It was a matter of life and death for the dynasty. The emperor's power was directly, visibly linked to the celestial order. A stable, predictable sky meant a stable, predictable rule. Chaos in the heavens meant chaos on earth. It was a cosmic performance review played out for all to see. A mainstream historical fact here is that the concept of the mandate of heaven was most fully articulated and became a foundational political doctrine during the Zhou dynasty. c. 1046, 256 BCE, succeeding the Shang. The Zhou kings used it to justify their overthrow of the Shang, claiming the Shang had lost the mandate due to their misrule. This established a precedent. Any new dynasty had to prove its worthiness to heaven, and celestial signs were key indicators. It provided a remarkably flexible, if terrifyingly unpredictable, framework for political change. Now, for a quirky tidbit, during periods of dynastic change or significant unrest, it wasn't uncommon for aspiring rebels or new leaders to manufacture or exaggerate celestial omens to bolster their claims to the mandate. Imagine a particularly ambitious general discovering a new, unusually bright star that just happens to align perfectly with his birth constellation. Or a meteor shower conveniently occurring right after he declares his rebellion. It's like an ancient celestial PR campaign, convincing the masses that the heavens themselves were endorsing your coup. Yes, well, Jupiter did align with my ambition, so I guess I have to become emperor. What a shame. Historians still argue whether the mandate of heaven was primarily a genuine spiritual belief held by the rulers and populace, or if it was predominantly a clever political tool used by ruling elites to maintain control and legitimize their power shifts. Was it a deeply felt religious conviction that truly guided imperial behavior, or was it a convenient narrative to explain away bad luck and justify new leadership? Perhaps it was both a complex tapestry of faith and realpolitik, where the awe of the heavens intertwined with the very pragmatic needs of governance. You're trying to project an aura of divine authority, but then a random supernova pops up, and suddenly you're sweating, hoping it's not pointing directly at your palace. The pressure must have been immense. Every cloud, every flicker, every celestial dance carried the weight of an entire empire, with the mandate of heaven hanging over their heads like a cosmic sword of Damocles. It's no surprise that astrological omens and portents became a central preoccupation for the imperial court. You see, it wasn't just about the grand headline-grabbing events like eclipses or comets, though those certainly caused a stir. It was also about the more subtle whispers from the heavens, the unusual planetary alignments, the unexpected brightness of a particular star, or even atmospheric phenomena like strange clouds or halos around the sun or moon. Every deviation from the norm was a potential message, a coded warning, or a celestial nod of approval, and the responsibility of interpreting these messages fell to a specialized class of officials. Imagine the pressure on these folks. You're not just a meteorologist, you're a cosmic therapist for the emperor. If you misinterpret a bad omen, you could be blamed for subsequent misfortunes. If you fail to report a good omen, you might miss an opportunity to bolster imperial prestige. It was a tightrope walk between genuine observation and politically convenient interpretation. Did that red tinge in the dawn sky mean a rebellion was brewing, or did someone just burn their breakfast? You'd better choose wisely. A mainstream historical fact here is that the Chinese developed a highly sophisticated system of astrology, often referred to as celestial observations, or astronomical prognostication, which was integrated directly into the state bureaucracy. Unlike Western astrology, which often focused on individual horoscopes, Chinese celestial prognostication was primarily concerned with the fate of the emperor, the imperial family, and the state itself. Every significant event in the sky was meticulously recorded and analyzed in relation to earthly affairs, from agricultural yields to military campaigns. The sky was the ultimate early warning system for dynastic stability. Now, for a quirky tidbit, one of the more unusual omens recorded involved guest stars, sudden appearances of new bright stars that would eventually fade. We now know these were supernovae, or novae exploding or brightening stars. The Chinese records of these events are some of the most accurate and detailed in the world, providing invaluable data for modern astronomers. But at the time, their appearance was often interpreted as a sign of significant change, usually associated with either the rise of a new powerful figure or a major upheaval in the empire. Imagine an ancient astronomer trying to explain that perfectly normal stellar explosion to an emperor who's convinced it means his cousin is plotting against him. No, Your Majesty, that's just the natural life cycle of a star. Nothing to worry about. Probably. Historians still argue whether the detailed recording of these omens was driven primarily by a superstitious fear of the unknown, or if the act of systematically cataloging and analyzing celestial events fostered a rudimentary form of scientific inquiry, even if the ultimate purpose was divinatory. Did the constant search for omens inadvertently lead to a deeper understanding of celestial mechanics? Or did the belief in omens simply dictate what they looked for, rather than how they understood it? It's a fascinating interplay between belief and observation. You're peering through a bamboo tube at the heavens, convinced that the fate of millions rests on whether that particular star twinkles a bit more than usual tonight. It's enough to make you lose sleep, which is ironic, considering this is a sleep-inducing podcast. Given the immense significance placed on celestial events, it's no surprise that the Chinese state didn't leave skywatching to chance or to a bunch of amateur stargazers with a nice view from their backyard. No, they established dedicated observatories and imperial bureaucracies to manage this critical function. You weren't just some dude with a telescope. You were a civil servant, likely with a rather important, if slightly terrifying job title, like Grand Astrologer or Director of the Bureau of Astronomy. This wasn't a hobby. It was a highly organized, state-sponsored enterprise, essential for maintaining the cosmic harmony, and by extension the Emperor's power. Imagine the scene, a sprawling complex, perhaps, within the imperial city walls, or perched on a strategic hilltop, filled with various instruments. Courtyards for observation and offices, where scribes meticulously recorded every flicker of light in the heavens. This wasn't just a place to look at stars, it was a hub of knowledge power, and perhaps a fair bit of nervous energy. The bureaucratic structure supporting this wasn't simple either. You'd have your chief astronomers, but also junior officials, scribes, instrument makers, and probably a few apprentices, whose main job was to keep the dust off the gnomons and make sure no one tripped over the armillary sphere in the dark. It was a serious operation, far removed from modern-day amateur astronomy clubs. A mainstream historical fact, one of the earliest and most renowned official astronomical bodies was the Bureau of Astronomy, or similar titles like the Bureau of the Grand Astrologer, which existed from the Han Dynasty 206 BCE, 220 CE onwards, if not earlier in a less formalized form. This bureau was responsible for compiling calendars, recording celestial phenomena, making astrological predictions, and even advising the emperor on auspicious dates for ceremonies or military campaigns. Their work was considered so vital that these officials often held significant influence, sometimes even advising on matters of state policy based on their cosmic interpretations. It was like having a direct hotline to heaven, and they were the operators. Now, for a quirky tidbit, there's evidence that imperial observatories sometimes had star palaces, or specialized viewing platforms designed not just for optimal viewing, but also for ritualistic purposes. These weren't just scientific stations. They were sacred spaces where the emperor or his designated representatives could symbolically commune with heaven. Imagine the Grand Astrologer clad in elaborate robes, performing rituals under the watchful eye of the constellations, all to ensure a good harvest or a successful battle. It adds a whole other layer to work-life balance when your job involves appeasing cosmic forces. Historians still argue whether the centralized control of astronomy, by the state ultimately stifled or fostered genuine scientific advancement in ancient China. On one hand, the state provided resources, infrastructure, and a clear mandate for observation, leading to remarkably long and detailed astronomical records. On the other hand, the primary focus on political prognostication and the need for interpretations that pleased the emperor might have discouraged independent scientific inquiry or alternative theories that didn't fit the established narrative. Did the imperial patronage lead to more data, but less daring thought, like a cosmic golden cage? You can almost hear a frustrated astronomer muttering, "Yes, but why does the planet retrograde? Not what does it mean for the harvest?" So you've got this sophisticated bureaucracy, these dedicated observatories, and a whole bunch of eager, or perhaps just anxious officials ready to interpret every celestial twitch. But what exactly were they using to peer into the heavens? They didn't have Hubble's or even Galileo's early telescopes. Instead, their brilliance lay in designing and constructing ingenious instruments, omens and armillary spheres, which, while simple by today's standards, were incredibly effective for their time, allowing for remarkably precise observations. Imagine a bright sunny day. You're standing next to a tall vertical pole sticking out of the ground, carefully aligned. That's a gnomon. It's basically the simplest sundial you can imagine, but its power lies in its simplicity and accuracy. By tracking the length and direction of its shadow throughout the day and year, ancient astronomers could determine the solstices and equinoxes, measure the length of the year, and even calculate the angle of the sun at midday. It sounds incredibly basic, like something you'd see in a primary school science project, but these were the bedrock measurements that formed the foundation of their entire calendrical system and their understanding of the sun's annual journey. Getting these measurements right was paramount, as it directly impacted agriculture and ritual timings. Now picture something a bit more complex, a beautiful, multi-ringed bronze contraption that looks like an ancient steampunk globe. That's an armillary sphere. Its name comes from the Latin armilla, meaning bracelet, referring to the rings that represent key celestial circles, like the celestial equator, the ecliptic, the sun's apparent path, and the celestial poles. By aligning its rings with the sky, observers could accurately determine the coordinates of stars and planets, tracking their positions with impressive precision. It was like a 3D model of the cosmos, allowing them to map and predict the movements of celestial bodies. Some versions even had sighting tubes, which, while not magnifying, helped in pointing accurately. A mainstream historical fact, the Chinese developed highly accurate omens, particularly for determining the length of the year, achieving a value of 365.25 days as early as the 4th century BCE. The gnomon at Luoyang, for instance, was legendary for its precision. As for armillary spheres, they were in use from at least the Han Dynasty, evolving over centuries into incredibly complex and beautiful instruments. The astronomer Zhang Heng in the 2nd century CE is credited with developing an armillary sphere that could be mechanically rotated by water power, essentially an early orrery, demonstrating the movements of the heavens in real time. This was a technological marvel, a testament to their engineering prowess. Now for a quirky tidbit. While Western astronomy often focused on the absolute positions of stars, Chinese astronomers, particularly with their armillary spheres, were often more interested in the relative positions of celestial bodies and their movements against the backdrop of the fixed stars. This emphasis on relative motion was crucial for tracking planets, which were, of course, the primary subjects of astrological prognostication. Imagine the astronomer meticulously adjusting the rings, trying to pinpoint exactly where Jupiter was, not just for scientific curiosity, but because its position might dictate whether the emperor should declare war or marry off a princess. All right, Jupiter's looking a bit grumpy today. Maybe hold off on that royal wedding, Your Majesty. Historians still argue whether the invention and refinement of these instruments were driven primarily by the practical needs of calendrical reform and astrological prognostication, or if there was an underlying pure scientific drive to understand the cosmos for its own sake. Did the imperative to accurately predict omens push the boundaries of instrument design, or did the capabilities of the instruments themselves inspire new avenues of inquiry? It's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. You needed accurate tools to predict the future, but perhaps those tools once built opened up new questions about the mechanics of the heavens that went beyond simple fortune-telling. With their gnomons tracking the sun and our armillary spheres mapping the stars, Chinese astronomers turned their meticulous gaze to the wanderers of the night sky, the 5 planets. For them, these weren't just distant points of light. They were celestial officials, each with a distinct personality and a profound influence on earthly affairs. Their movements, their conjunctions, their retrogrades, their appearances in specific constellations were scrutinized with an intensity that would make a modern-day data analyst blush. You see, in Chinese cosmology, the visible planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, were deeply intertwined with the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, water, and by extension with different aspects of the terrestrial world, including directions, seasons, colors, and even the organs of the human body. This wasn't just a simple mnemonic. It was a comprehensive philosophical system that linked the macrocosm of the heavens to the microcosm of human existence and the state. Each planet, therefore, carried a specific kind of cosmic energy and message. Mars, fiery and red, was associated with war and rebellion. Jupiter, with its steady progress, with wood and growth, and the emperor himself. Saturn, slow and deliberate, with earth and stability, or perhaps with the central government. Imagine an astronomer explaining to the emperor that Mars is looking particularly agitated this month, perhaps foreshadowing military conflict or civil unrest, or that Venus, the morning star, is shining particularly brightly, indicating prosperity. The interpretation wasn't just about good or bad. It was nuanced, tied to specific imperial policies or potential events. The movements of these planets were like a celestial daily newspaper, providing headlines about the empire's future. A mainstream historical fact, the Chinese kept incredibly detailed and continuous records of planetary movements, far surpassing those of many other ancient civilizations in their longevity and precision. For instance, the planetary tables found in texts like the Shiji records of the Grand Historian detail planetary positions over centuries. These records are so comprehensive that modern astronomers have used them to refine our understanding of long-term planetary orbits and even to track changes in Earth's rotation. It's a testament to their dedication that data they collected millennia ago is still scientifically valuable today. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the names given to these planets in Chinese weren't based on Roman deities like ours, Mars, Venus, etc., but directly reflected their elemental associations. Mercury was the water star, Shu Vixu Ening Venus, the metal star, Ju Nexi Ning Mars, the fire star, Huo Vexi Ning Jupiter, the wood star, Mugxi Ning, and Saturn the earth star, Tu Vixi Ning. This linguistic connection reinforced their cosmological significance. So when they talked about the water star, they were immediately thinking about fluidity communication, and perhaps even floods, not some winged messenger god. It's a very practical, if deeply symbolic, way of naming. Historians still argue whether the meticulous recording of planetary positions was driven solely by their astrological significance, or if the very act of tracking them over long periods fostered an embryonic form of predictive astronomy. Did the desire to interpret omens inadvertently lead to the discovery of patterns in planetary motion that moved beyond simple prognostication? It's a subtle but important distinction. Were they just collecting data for cosmic fortune-telling, or did the data itself start to hint at underlying physical laws, even if those laws weren't explicitly articulated in a modern scientific sense? You're essentially looking for a pattern to predict whether your ruler will face a rebellion, but in doing so, you're unwittingly charting the very clockwork of the solar system. While the planets were the wandering dignitaries of the sky, the star maps and constellation systems were the fixed backdrop against which all celestial drama unfolded. Unlike the familiar 12 constellations of the Western zodiac, ancient Chinese astronomers developed an entirely different, incredibly intricate, and far more numerous system for charting the night sky. You weren't looking for Aries or Gemini. You were navigating a celestial bureaucracy of palaces, markets, and officials all meticulously placed in the heavens. Imagine looking up and seeing not just random stars, but a cosmic blueprint of your own earthly society. The stars weren't just stars. They were tiny points of light that collectively formed symbolic representations of the emperor's court, the imperial family government, ministries, military encampments, and even common tools or animals. This wasn't just decorative. It provided a framework for interpreting omens. If a comet appeared in the marketplace constellation, it might suggest economic upheaval. If a new star flared in the general's tent, it could portend military success or disaster. Every part of the sky had its earthly counterpart and its specific meaning. A mainstream historical fact here is that the Chinese divided the celestial sphere into 4 palaces or quadrants: the azure dragon of the east, the vermilion bird of the south, the white tiger of the west, and the black tortoise of the north, each associated with a season and containing 7 lodges or lunar mansions. Within these 28 lunar mansions, there were hundreds of individual asterisms, smaller constellations often numbering well over 300 each, with its own name and significance. This system, which dates back to at least the Warring States period, 475–221 BCE, provided a far more granular way of pinpointing celestial events than the broader Western constellations. It's like comparing a high-resolution satellite image to a basic roadmap. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some of these asterisms represented remarkably mundane objects or activities for a celestial map. You have constellations named the well, the kitchen, the privy, the cistern, and even the crooked stick. Imagine being an ancient astronomer, pointing at the sky and saying, "Ah, yes, the stars of the privy are looking particularly dim tonight, Your Majesty." Perhaps an omen regarding waste management. It humanizes their view of the cosmos, doesn't it? It wasn't all grand dragons and emperors. Sometimes it was just celestial plumbing. Historians still argue whether the Chinese constellation system evolved independently, or if there were any early influences from other cultures, given the vast distances and limited contact in ancient times. While the distinct nature of the Chinese system points to independent development, the possibility of some very early, subtle cross-cultural exchange through trade routes or nomadic migrations is not entirely dismissed. Did they arrive at this intricate system entirely on their own? Or did a faint whisper of knowledge from distant lands inspire a new way of looking at the stars? You're charting the heavens, building a complex celestial map, and every now and then you wonder if, just perhaps, someone else far, far away is looking at those same stars and seeing something completely different. Beyond the grand pronouncements of dynastic fate and the intricate celestial maps, there was a far more immediate and practical reason for the relentless sky watching, the lunar cycles and agricultural calendars. You might not survive a bad omen from Jupiter, but you definitely wouldn't survive a failed harvest. For a predominantly agrarian society, knowing when to plant, when to sow, and when to reap was a matter of life and death for millions. And the moon, with its predictable waxing and waning, was the most accessible and reliable celestial clock for everyday life. Imagine you're a farmer living by the rhythms of the land. You don't have a smartphone app telling you the best time to plant your rice. Instead, you're looking at the moon, tracking its phases, noting the position of certain constellations in relation to its path. The new moon, the full moon, the crescent. Each phase signaled a different period in the month, guiding activities from irrigation to harvesting. This was grassroots astronomy, vital for every family's survival, far removed from the imperial court's high-stakes prognostications. This reliance on the moon led to the development of a sophisticated lunisolar calendar. The challenge was that a purely lunar calendar, based on the moon's phases, doesn't quite align with the solar year, which dictates the seasons. If you just followed the moon, your planting seasons would drift. So the genius of the Chinese calendar lay in its ability to reconcile these two cycles using lunar months, but inserting an extra intercalary month, a leap month, every few years to keep the calendar synchronized with the solar year and crucially with the agricultural seasons. It was a cosmic juggling act, ensuring that spring always arrived when it was supposed to, at least according to the calendar. A mainstream historical fact, the Chinese developed a lunisolar calendar that was remarkably accurate, often containing 12 lunar months, but adding a 13th intercalary month roughly 7 times every 19 years to stay aligned with the solar year. This sophisticated system, known as the Metonic cycle in the West, though independently discovered in China much earlier, ensured that festivals and agricultural activities remained aligned with the seasons. It wasn't just about marking time. It was about ensuring the stability and prosperity of the entire agricultural economy. The state, through its astronomers, literally dictated the rhythm of life for its people. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the names of the Chinese months often reflected agricultural activities or seasonal characteristics rather than simply being numbered. For example, some early month names might translate to sprouting month or harvest moon month, making the calendar inherently practical and deeply connected to the land. Imagine telling someone it's cloud gathering month rather than just July. It lends a certain poetic charm to the daily grind of farming, doesn't it? though I'm sure the farmers were more concerned with the actual clouds than the poetic name. Historians still argue whether the calendrical reforms were always driven by pure scientific observation and necessity, or if they were sometimes influenced by political considerations, such as a new dynasty wanting to demonstrate its divine mandate by correcting the calendar of the previous regime. Was it always about making a better calendar for the people? Or was it sometimes about a new emperor literally resetting the cosmic clock to reflect his own claim to power? You're crunching numbers, calculating cycles, but in the back of your mind, you know that if you get this wrong, it's not just a bad harvest. It's a potential blow to the emperor's cosmic street cred. If the moon was the reliable, everyday clock, then solar eclipses were the ultimate celestial alarm bells, ringing with terrifying urgency. Imagine the scene. It's midday. The sun, the very source of light and life, begins to dim. A strange twilight descends, shadows sharpen, and the air grows eerily cool. Then slowly, inexorably, the sun is devoured, leaving only a ghostly corona in the sky. For the ancient Chinese, this wasn't just an astronomical event. It was the dragon devouring the sun, a cosmic catastrophe, a direct threat to the emperor and the very order of the universe. You see, the sun represented the emperor, the ultimate source of imperial power and cosmic harmony. Its temporary disappearance was therefore interpreted as a dire omen, a sign of heaven's profound displeasure with the ruler. The immediate reaction wasn't scientific curiosity, it was fear, panic, and an urgent need for ritualistic intervention. This was not a moment for polite observation. It was a moment for pounding drums and frantic prayers. When an eclipse occurred, the imperial court would erupt into a flurry of activity. Officials would rush to perform elaborate ceremonies designed to frighten away the celestial dragon or beast that was consuming the sun. Drums would be beaten, arrows would be fired into the sky, and prayers would be offered, all with the desperate hope of restoring the sun's light and averting divine wrath. It was a grand theatrical display of humanity's attempt to influence the cosmos, to literally scare a cosmic monster into spitting out the sun. A mainstream historical fact, ancient Chinese records of solar eclipses are among the most extensive and accurate in the world, dating back to as early as 2137 BCE, though some of these earliest records are debated for their precision. The Shujing classic of history recounts the legend of the astronomers Shi and he being executed for failing to predict an eclipse, highlighting the dire consequences of astronomical error and the absolute necessity of accurate prediction. This tale, whether entirely true or a cautionary myth, underscores the critical role of eclipse prediction for the imperial court. It wasn't just about getting the date right, it was about protecting the emperor's life and the stability of the realm. Now for a quirky tidbit. While the primary mythological explanation was the dragon devouring the sun, other traditions also existed. Some believed it was a celestial dog, or a toad, or some other hungry beast. Regardless of the specific creature, the underlying fear was the same. A powerful, malevolent entity was attacking the most vital celestial body, and it was up to humans to intervene. Imagine the relief, the collective sigh when the sun finally reappeared, as if the furious drumming and arrow shooting had actually worked. Phew, we scared it off this time. Everyone. Good job, team. Historians still argue whether the extreme fear and ritualistic responses to eclipses eventually led to a more scientific understanding of their periodicity, or if the strong belief in their ominous nature actually hindered pure astronomical inquiry. Did the desperate need to predict these terrifying events push astronomers to understand their patterns, or did the overwhelming focus on the meaning of the eclipse overshadow any deeper curiosity about how they occurred? You're tasked with saving the Emperor from a cosmic dragon, and somehow in the process, you end up doing some pretty sophisticated math, but the dragon is always at the forefront of your mind. If solar eclipses were dramatic, terrifying events, then comets and guest stars were the mysterious, often beautiful, but no less significant heavenly visitors. Unlike the predictable rhythm of the planets or the terrifying regularity of eclipses, these phenomena appeared seemingly out of nowhere, blazing across the sky or suddenly shining brighter than anything seen before. For the ancient Chinese, they were not merely transient celestial bodies. They were potent messages, often heralding great changes, both good and ill on Earth. Imagine gazing up one night and seeing a fuzzy luminous blob with a long tail streaking across the familiar constellations. Or a star previously unnoticed, suddenly flaring with dazzling brilliance, outshining all its neighbors. The immediate reaction wouldn't be to grab a camera. It would be to summon the astronomers to interpret this sign. Was it a messenger of fortune, bringing news of a new emperor, or a harbinger of doom, warning of famine, rebellion, or war? The lack of predictability made them all the more compelling and terrifying as omens. Comets, with their often spectacular tails, were often seen as broom stars, sweeping away the old, signifying change, sometimes violent. Their direction of movement, their color, and the length of their tails were all meticulously noted and interpreted. Guest stars, which we now know as novae, new stars or supernovae, exploding stars, were even more puzzling. Their sudden appearance and gradual fading were often linked to major political upheavals, the rise or fall of dynasties, or the death of important figures. The sky was literally writing cosmic headlines, and the astronomers were the imperial news anchors. A mainstream historical fact: Chinese astronomers maintained the most extensive and detailed records of comets and guest stars, novae, supernovae, in the pre-telescopic world. The Mawangdui silk texts dating from the 2nd century BCE include a comet atlas, the Tianwen Qixiang Zhazhen, that illustrates different types of comets with their tails, along with their astrological interpretations. Moreover, their records of supernovae, like the famous SN 1054, which formed the Crab Nebula, are crucial for modern astrophysics, providing the exact dates and positions needed to study stellar evolution. These aren't just quaint observations. They are invaluable scientific data, meticulously collected over millennia. Now, for a quirky tidbit, some of the descriptions of comets in ancient Chinese texts sound incredibly poetic, almost fantastical, for what we now understand as icy dust balls. They describe them as hairy stars, bushy stars, or long-tailed pheasants, depending on the appearance of their tails. Imagine trying to explain to the emperor that the long-tailed pheasant comet means nothing. It's just a chunk of ice and rock doing its thing. You'd probably find yourself looking for a new job, or worse. The language itself reflects a blending of scientific observation with rich metaphorical interpretation. Historians still argue whether the remarkable precision and continuity of these observations were primarily a byproduct of superstitious fears, driving meticulous record-keeping, or if a genuine, if unarticulated scientific curiosity about these transient phenomena also played a role. Did the desire to interpret every flicker and streak lead them to accidentally become the world's best record keepers of transient celestial events? Or was there an underlying drive to understand the nature of these objects, even if the primary justification for the work was astrological? You're tracking a strange glowing visitor, not just to predict the future, but perhaps deep down to understand what it is. So you've got these celestial visitors, these portents, these regular cycles, all demanding constant, meticulous observation. Who exactly were the people living this fascinating high-pressure existence? What was the daily life like for these professional astronomers in ancient China? It wasn't quite what you might imagine if you're picturing a modern scientist in a lab coat sipping coffee. Their world was a blend of scholarship, ritual, bureaucracy, and a whole lot of sleepless nights. Imagine yourself as a junior astronomer in an imperial observatory. Your day, or more accurately, your night, would revolve around precise observation. You'd be meticulously adjusting an armillary sphere, perhaps manually rotating a water-powered mechanism, or carefully sighting through a tube at a faint star. Your hands would be calloused from working with bronze instruments, your eyes accustomed to the darkness, constantly scanning the skies. There'd be endless record-keeping, scrolls filled with precise dates, times, positions, and detailed descriptions of every celestial event, no matter how minor. Every comet, every guest star, every unusual planetary alignment had to be recorded, dated, and stored for future reference and interpretation. Beyond the actual stargazing, there was the intellectual labor. You'd be poring over ancient texts, studying the interpretations of previous generations, trying to decipher the subtle meanings of celestial phenomena. There was a strong element of continuity, a tradition passed down through centuries. You weren't just observing, you were participating in a long, unbroken lineage of cosmic interpreters. And then there was the political dimension, preparing reports for the emperor, advising on auspicious dates, perhaps even having to deliver bad news about a looming omen. The pressure must have been immense, knowing that your interpretations could influence imperial decisions and potentially your own fate if things went south. It was a job that required extreme diligence, unwavering concentration, and a very thick skin. A mainstream historical fact, imperial astronomers in China were often highly educated scholars who held significant status within the bureaucracy. Many, like Zhang Heng 78 or 139 CE, were not just astronomers, but polymaths excelling in fields like engineering, mathematics, poetry, and philosophy. This holistic approach meant that astronomical knowledge was integrated into a broader intellectual framework, rather than being a standalone, isolated science. They weren't just number crunchers. They were deep thinkers who saw the cosmos as an integral part of the philosophical and political order. Now, for a quirky tidbit to ensure continuity and accuracy, many observatories operated almost continuously, with shifts of astronomers working throughout the night. Imagine the camaraderie, or perhaps the competitive tension, between these nocturnal scholars. They would probably have developed their own slang, their own inside jokes about particularly troublesome constellations or clumsy apprentices. You can almost hear one grumbling, "Jupiter's in retrograde again," just when I thought I was getting some sleep. And considering the lack of artificial light, Their night vision must have been legendary. Historians still argue whether the high status and government patronage of astronomers truly fostered a spirit of independent scientific inquiry, or if the primary demand for politically expedient astrological predictions ultimately constrained their intellectual freedom. Did the imperial embrace lead to an environment where true scientific breakthroughs could emerge, or did it turn astronomers into mere functionaries, always seeking answers that aligned with the emperor's desires? You're a brilliant mind charting the stars, but your biggest challenge might not be a cloudy night, but rather figuring out how to tell your boss that the Star of Rebellion just appeared. Even with dedicated professionals and sophisticated instruments, ancient Chinese astronomers faced plenty of practical headaches. Stargazing sounds romantic, but in reality, it was a constant battle against the elements and, surprisingly, other environmental factors. You're out there trying to pinpoint a specific star, and suddenly you're grappling with challenges like clouds, light pollution, and even pests. It was enough to make even the most patient scholar want to pull their hair out. Imagine a crucial night for observation. Perhaps a rare planetary conjunction is predicted, or a guest star is expected to make its appearance. You've prepared your instruments, adjusted everything meticulously, and then a wall of clouds rolls in, stubbornly obscuring your view. There's nothing you can do but wait, hoping for a break, knowing that a missed observation could have dire consequences for your reputation, or worse, for the Emperor's peace of mind. Clouds were the arch nemesis of ancient astronomers, a constant, unpredictable bane. Oh, Jupiter's in conjunction with Mars tonight. Sorry, boss, looks like heaven's having a duvet day. Then there was the ancient equivalent of light pollution. While not as severe as modern urban glow, even then, the flickering lamps of the imperial city, the torches of guards, or the smoke from countless cooking fires could diminish the clarity of the night sky, particularly for fainter objects near the horizon. You're trying to spot a dim comet, and some palace guard decides it's the perfect time to light 100 new lanterns outside your observatory. It's frustrating enough to make you wish you had a celestial "Do Not Disturb" sign. And let's not forget the smaller, more insidious challenges: pests. Imagine you've spent hours meticulously inking a star map, and a rogue insect decides your parchment is a cozy place to build a nest. Or a sudden gust of wind blows dust and debris onto your carefully polished bronze instruments, requiring another round of tedious cleaning. Vermin damp and the general wear and tear of time and weather were constant threats to their delicate equipment and precious records. It's like trying to do astrophysics while fending off a mosquito army in a dusty shed. A mainstream historical fact: despite these challenges, ancient Chinese astronomers developed ingenious methods to cope. For example, to minimize the effects of atmospheric interference or poor visibility, observations were often repeated by multiple astronomers, sometimes even from different locations, to confirm findings. They also meticulously recorded weather conditions alongside their astronomical observations, providing a valuable historical record of ancient climates. This demonstrated a pragmatic scientific approach to dealing with the inherent limitations of their environment. Now for a quirky tidbit: there are some anecdotal accounts, though difficult to verify, of astronomers developing methods to predict clear nights based on subtle changes in air pressure or animal behavior, akin to folk meteorology. Imagine an astronomer squinting at a flock of birds, trying to decipher if their flight pattern means clear skies or another night of frustrating cloud cover. Or perhaps a particularly wise owl was consulted for its wisdom on atmospheric conditions. The owl says it's going to be cloudy, Your Majesty. Blame the owl. Historians still argue whether the persistent environmental challenges faced by astronomers encouraged more rigorous observation techniques and the development of more robust instruments, or if they sometimes led to educated guesswork and reliance on tradition when direct observation was impossible. Did the difficulties force them to be more inventive and precise, or did they sometimes just shrug and fill in the blanks? You're trying to deliver cosmic truth, but sometimes the truth is just a heavy cloud bank and a very hungry bat flying around your head. Despite China's largely self-contained astronomical tradition, it wasn't entirely a closed system. Throughout its long history, there were fascinating instances of foreign astronomical exchange, where ideas, instruments, and observational data flowed, albeit sometimes slowly and indirectly, between China and other civilizations. You see, knowledge, much like trade goods, had a way of crossing borders, even if those borders were vast deserts or treacherous seas. Imagine a scholar from the Middle East arriving at the imperial court, perhaps as part of a diplomatic mission, bringing with him new astronomical tables or descriptions of different instruments from his homeland. Or a Buddhist monk returning from India, carrying not just religious texts, but also concepts of celestial movements or calendrical systems from the subcontinent. These interactions, while not always continuous or widespread, provided glimpses into alternative ways of understanding the cosmos, sometimes challenging, sometimes complementing existing Chinese knowledge. It was like getting a peek at another country's cosmic rulebook, and sometimes realizing they had a few tricks you didn't. One of the most significant periods of exchange occurred during the Yuan dynasty, 1271–1368 CE, when China was ruled by the Mongols. This era saw a considerable influx of Islamic astronomical knowledge and technology. The Mongols, having conquered vast swathes of Eurasia, facilitated the transfer of ideas across their empire. Muslim astronomers were brought to China, and Chinese astronomers were sent to the Islamic world. This wasn't just a friendly chat. It was a deliberate effort to synthesize knowledge. A mainstream historical fact during the Yuan dynasty, the prominent Persian astronomer Jamal al-Din arrived in China and presented Kublai Khan with a number of Islamic astronomical instruments, including a universal astrolabe and a terrestrial globe. He also contributed to the revision of the Chinese calendar and the construction of new observatories. This was a direct, tangible transfer of advanced astronomical tools and methods enriching the existing Chinese tradition. Imagine the look on the Chinese astronomers' faces when they saw an astrolabe for the first time. Wait, it does that. Now, for a quirky tidbit, sometimes these exchanges were driven by the sheer practical need for more accurate calendrical prediction, particularly for events like eclipses. If a foreign method seemed to offer better precision, it was explored even if it came from a culturally distant source. It was a pragmatic approach. If it worked, use it. So you might have Muslim and Chinese astronomers, with their vastly different cosmological frameworks, sitting side by side comparing notes on planetary tables, united by the shared goal of not getting executed for a failed eclipse prediction. They probably just bonded over the universal frustration of cloudy nights. Historians still argue whether these periods of foreign astronomical exchange led to a genuine paradigm shift in Chinese astronomy, or if the introduced ideas were largely assimilated and adapted to fit existing Chinese cosmological frameworks without fundamentally altering them. Did these external influences spark a true revolution in their understanding of the heavens, or were they more like useful additions, like adding a new tool to an already well-stocked toolbox without changing the entire workshop? You're sharing notes with someone from across the world, marveling at their instruments, but deep down you still interpret that comet as a sign of imperial misfortune, not just a chunk of ice. Speaking of knowledge crossing borders, the exchange of astronomical ideas wasn't always about grand diplomatic missions or invited scholars. Often it happened more organically along the ancient trade arteries, particularly the famed Silk Road's cosmic connections. You see, these weren't just routes for silk spices and porcelain. They were conduits for culture philosophy, and yes, even astronomical insights. Imagine a caravan plodding through the deserts of Central Asia, carrying not just goods, but also stories, observations, and perhaps even rudimentary star charts scribbled on parchment. A merchant from the West might recount tales of Greek spheres and star names, while a traveler from the East might describe the elaborate observatories of Chang'an. These were casual, unofficial transmissions, often filtered through multiple languages and interpretations, but they contributed to a gradual, subtle blending of knowledge across vast distances. It was like an ancient, slow-motion internet transmitting snippets of cosmic data, one camel ride at a time. While formal scientific treatises might not have been exchanged regularly along these routes, practical knowledge like methods for calculating positions or understanding seasonal changes could easily have been shared. A traveler relying on the stars for navigation might pick up a trick from a local guide, or a calendrical expert might hear of a new method for predicting solstices from a passing caravan. These weren't about grand theoretical frameworks, but about practical, immediately useful information that could make a difference in everyday life or long-distance travel. A mainstream historical fact, although the most documented astronomical exchanges occurred during the Yuan dynasty. Evidence suggests earlier, less formal interactions along the Silk Road dating back to the Han dynasty. For example, some historians propose that elements of Indian astronomy, with its emphasis on planetary calculations and specific constellations, might have found their way into China via Buddhist transmission routes and the associated trade networks long before the major Islamic influx. This indicates a consistent, if sometimes subtle, flow of astronomical concepts. Now for a quirky tidbit, imagine a tired merchant setting up camp under a clear desert sky using the familiar stars to navigate. Suddenly, a local guide points out a constellation they've never seen before, or describes a different way of charting the moon's path. These informal exchanges, probably over a campfire and some strong tea, could have been incredibly potent. They weren't about proving a theory. They were about practical application. Oh, you use that star to find north. Fascinating. We use this one. It's a reminder that knowledge travels on foot, not just in libraries. Historians still argue whether the astronomical information exchanged along the Silk Road was primarily practical, like navigation tips, or if more theoretical cosmological ideas also filtered through. Was it mostly about sharing useful tricks for getting from point A to point B, or did the conversations delve into deeper philosophical questions about the nature of the cosmos? You're a trader, moving goods and stories, and maybe, just Maybe you're also an unwitting conduit for new ways of seeing the universe. It's a testament to human curiosity that even in the most arduous journeys, the stars remained a shared point of wonder and knowledge. So we've seen how imperial bureaucracy, detailed observations, and even foreign exchanges all fed into one crucial outcome: calendrical reform and political power. This wasn't just about making sure farmers planted their crops at the right time. It was about the emperor's very legitimacy, a tangible demonstration of his mandate of heaven. A well-ordered, accurate calendar wasn't a mere administrative tool. It was a cosmic declaration of the current dynasty's right to rule. Imagine a new emperor ascending to the throne. One of the first things he'd do, or at least commission, would be a new calendar. Why? Because the calendar of the previous dynasty by definition reflected their cosmic harmony. To establish his own mandate, the new emperor needed to show that he too was in tune with heaven. This often meant launching a major calendrical reform, even if the old calendar was perfectly accurate. It was a symbolic act, a reset of the cosmic clock under his reign. This wasn't about subtle tweaks. It was about asserting cosmic authority. Yes, the old calendar was fine, but my calendar is divinely inspired, obviously. The astronomers and calendrical experts would be tasked with this monumental undertaking. They would pore over old records, make new observations, and calculate with extreme precision the lengths of the year, the cycles of the moon, and the movements of the planets. The goal was to eliminate any discrepancies, predict eclipses with flawless accuracy, and ensure that all agricultural and ritual timings were perfectly aligned. A precise calendar wasn't just useful. It was proof that the emperor was maintaining cosmic order, that heaven was indeed smiling upon his rule. A calendar that fell out of sync, or worse, failed to predict an eclipse, was a direct indictment of imperial rule. A mainstream historical fact, nearly every new dynasty in Chinese history initiated a calendrical reform, often known as correcting the calendar. One of the most famous examples is the Taichu calendar, introduced by Emperor Wu of Han in 104 BCE, a revolutionary reform that integrated knowledge from various schools of thought, refined the length of the year, and standardized the 24 solar terms, which were crucial for agriculture. This calendar was a massive undertaking reflecting the Han dynasty's consolidation of power and its claim to a new unified cosmic order. Now, for a quirky tidbit, sometimes political tensions between rival scholarly factions could play out in calendrical debates. Different schools of astronomy might propose slightly different calculations for the length of the year or the timing of an eclipse, each vying for imperial favor. Imagine a heated debate at court, not about tax policy, but about whether the summer solstice should fall on the 21st or 22nd of the month, with careers and fortunes potentially hanging in the balance. It gives a whole new meaning to academic rivalry. My calendar is more aligned with the celestial dragon, Your Majesty. His is clearly aligned with the celestial toad. Historians still argue whether the constant pressure for calendrical reform, driven by political imperatives, ultimately benefited or hindered the scientific progress of astronomy in China. On one hand, it provided continuous funding and motivation for astronomical research and observation, leading to an incredibly long and rich data set. On the other hand, it often prioritized political expediency over pure scientific curiosity. potentially stifling radical new theories that didn't align with the need for a stable, authoritative calendar. Was it a symbiotic relationship or a restrictive one? You're a brilliant mathematician calculating the celestial dance, but you know that your numbers better make the Emperor happy, or your head might just start dancing on its own. Despite all the precise calculations, the meticulous record-keeping, and the sophisticated instruments, ancient Chinese astronomy wasn't purely a realm of cold hard facts. The line between careful observation and widespread unexplained phenomena and superstition was often delightfully blurry. You see, for every predicted eclipse or charted planetary movement, there were countless other celestial happenings that simply defied rational explanation, leaving fertile ground for popular belief and folklore. Imagine a strange light appearing in the sky, shimmering and dancing unlike anything seen before. Or a series of inexplicable atmospheric phenomena, unusual halos, strange cloud formations, or even what we might now call UFOs, unidentified flying objects, but definitely not alien spacecraft, just to be clear. For the common person and often for the imperial court itself, these weren't just meteorological curiosities. They were signs, portents, or even manifestations of spirits and deities. When faced with the truly unknown, the human mind often defaults to the supernatural, and ancient China was no exception. Did you see that it looked like a dragon breathing fire, or maybe just swamp gas, who knows? These unexplained phenomena often fueled popular superstitions, leading to local rituals, offerings, or even mass hysteria. While imperial astronomers were busy with their official interpretations, the populace might have their own, often more colorful explanations, rooted in local legends and animistic beliefs. The official narrative was about the emperor's mandate, but the street-level interpretation might be about mischievous spirits or angry ancestors, a mainstream historical fact. Historical texts frequently record anomalous phenomena that don't fit neatly into modern scientific categories. These include descriptions of falling stars like rain, meteor showers, strange lights in the heavens, or celestial rivers changing course. While some of these can be retrospectively identified as known astronomical events, many remain ambiguous, highlighting the limitations of ancient observation and the natural human tendency to interpret the unknown through a cultural lens. The official records were thorough, but their descriptions often reflected the prevalent worldview. Now, for a quirky tidbit, there are accounts of celestial dogs, or sky foxes, being seen in the heavens, sometimes described as strange glowing creatures, possibly related to aurora borealis sightings or rare atmospheric optical phenomena. Imagine trying to explain to a terrified villager that the sky fox they just saw was merely a reflection of ice crystals in the upper atmosphere. Good luck with that. These tales added a vibrant, fantastical layer to their understanding of the night sky, making it not just a canvas of stars, but a stage for mythical beings. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of these superstitions genuinely impeded the development of a more purely scientific, mechanistic view of the universe, or if they simply existed alongside and sometimes informed the more formal astronomical inquiries. Did the constant search for omens and the interpretation of the unexplained hold back a deeper understanding of celestial mechanics, or were they simply two parallel ways of making sense of a vast and mysterious cosmos? You're an astronomer, calmly recording the data, but even you might find yourself wondering just for a moment, If that strange green glow in the distance is truly just atmospheric dust, or if perhaps, just perhaps, a celestial dog is indeed having an unusually bright evening. Beyond the grand cosmic pronouncements and the daily grind of calendrical precision, ancient Chinese astronomy had surprisingly pragmatic applications. It wasn't all about predicting imperial doom or ensuring a good harvest. The meticulous charting of the heavens and the understanding of celestial movements also played a crucial role in navigation and warfare, providing practical advantages that could mean the difference between a successful journey or a lost army. Imagine you're a military general leading your troops through unfamiliar territory, perhaps under the cover of darkness, to launch a surprise attack. Without maps as we know them, and with unreliable compasses, the stars became your ultimate guide. Knowing how to identify the North Star, or what they used as a polar reference as their North Star, wasn't always ours. How to track the movement of constellations and how to gauge direction from the celestial sphere was absolutely vital. It was celestial GPS, literally guiding armies across vast landscapes. This wasn't about omens. It was about getting from point A to point B without getting lost or ambushed. Similarly for merchants on long-distance journeys, or for early mariners venturing along the coastlines and eventually further afield, the stars were their constant companions and most reliable navigators. While Chinese seafaring didn't extensively involve transoceanic voyages, as early as some Western traditions, coastal navigation and riverine travel would still benefit immensely from astronomical knowledge. Knowing when to depart based on auspicious celestial signs, or simply using the stars to maintain a bearing, added a layer of strategic advantage. A mainstream historical fact: Chinese military strategists and commanders from early periods like the Han Dynasty were known to utilize astronomical knowledge for military purposes. This included using celestial observations for timing military campaigns, launching an attack under an auspicious planetary alignment, and crucially for navigation during night marches or in unfamiliar terrain. Historical records often mention generals using the Big Dipper, or Polaris the pole star, to orient their forces, a testament to the practical application of celestial knowledge in warfare. It was the ultimate tactical advantage, knowing where you were going when your enemies didn't. Now for a quirky tidbit, there's evidence that military commanders might have employed their own, less formal, military astrologers, or celestial advisors, who specialized not just in grand dynastic prophecies, but in more immediate tactical advice based on the stars. Imagine a general asking, "Should we attack at dawn, Master Astrologer, or wait for the moon to be in the constellation of the Tiger's Jaw?" These were the ancient equivalent of military intelligence officers, but their intelligence came from the sky. They likely had a very specific, practical interpretation of omens related to battle and logistics. Historians still argue whether the practical applications of astronomy in navigation and warfare were consistently and widely employed, or if they were more exceptional instances primarily reserved for elite military operations. Was this knowledge broadly disseminated among navigators and low-ranking officers, or was it a closely guarded secret of the imperial court and its top generals? You're a general planning your next move, and you're hoping your starry-eyed advisor isn't just making things up to sound important, because a wrong turn at night could mean the end of your army and your career. You've heard about the meticulous observations, the grand observatories, the practical applications, and the vital link between the heavens and imperial power. But like many great traditions, Chinese astronomy, particularly its more scientific aspects, eventually faced periods of decline and stagnation. The story of its evolution wasn't a continuous upward climb. It was marked by ebbs and flows, and sometimes the very imperial control that fostered it also led to the decline of independent observation. Imagine being an astronomer under a rigid conservative emperor. You're encouraged to record what you see, but any deviation from established interpretations, any new theory that challenges the existing cosmological framework, or any observation that might be inconvenient for the imperial narrative, could be met with suspicion, even punishment. The imperative shifted from understanding the cosmos to simply confirming the emperor's divine right and validating existing beliefs. When the primary purpose of your science is political prognostication, true scientific inquiry, which thrives on challenging assumptions and pursuing inconvenient truths, can wither. This wasn't always a dramatic suppression. Often, it was a subtle shift in emphasis. The focus became less on theoretical understanding or the underlying mechanics of celestial phenomena, and more on calendrical accuracy and astrological interpretation. Innovation might have been viewed with suspicion, as it could imply that the previous, imperially sanctioned calendar or cosmological model was flawed. You weren't supposed to invent new ways of seeing the universe. You were supposed to perfect the old ways and make sure the prophecies were spot on. A mainstream historical fact during certain periods, particularly after the Song dynasty, 960–1279 CE, and leading into the Ming, 1368–1644 CE. While observation continued, a perceived decline in theoretical innovation and a stagnation in astronomical progress occurred relative to concurrent advancements in other parts of the world, particularly the Islamic world and later Europe. This was partly due to the highly centralized nature of astronomy, where the imperial court strictly controlled access to astronomical knowledge and instruments, making it difficult for independent scholars to contribute or challenge established views. Now, for a quirky tidbit, sometimes the decline manifested in a literal loss of skills. If an astronomer, trained in a specific technique, died without passing on their knowledge, or if imperial purges led to the execution or banishment of experts, crucial astronomical methods could be forgotten. Imagine a master instrument maker, the only one who knows how to calibrate a particular kind of armillary sphere, falling out of favor, and suddenly a vital piece of expertise is lost to the imperial observatory. It's like your favorite app developer leaving without documenting their code. Historians still argue whether this decline was an inevitable consequence of China's unique political structure, or if it was simply a natural phase in the development of any long-standing scientific tradition subject to periods of growth and stagnation. Was the imperial embrace of astronomy a double-edged sword, providing resources but ultimately stifling intellectual freedom? You're an astronomer, watching the patterns, and you realize that your observations might contradict the official narrative, but speaking up could cost you your head. Sometimes silence is the wisest course, even if it means sacrificing a deeper truth about the cosmos. The story of ancient Chinese astronomy isn't just about what was seen and recorded. It's also about what was lost records and hidden knowledge. Over millennia, countless texts, detailed observations, and descriptions of instruments have vanished, victims of dynastic upheavals, wars, fires, and the deliberate suppression or reinterpretation of knowledge. It's like having a library full of cosmic secrets, only for large sections to be eaten by moths, or worse, burned by emperors with a different agenda. Imagine the sheer volume of scrolls and wooden tablets meticulously inscribed with astronomical data, calendrical calculations, and astrological interpretations gathered over centuries. Now picture a major rebellion, an invading army, or a new emperor intent on erasing the legacy of his predecessors. Libraries, including astronomical bureaus, were often targets. Buildings burned, records were scattered or deliberately destroyed, and the accumulated knowledge of generations could simply vanish in a puff of smoke, leaving frustrating gaps in our understanding today. It's the ultimate intellectual tragedy, a cosmic data set lost to history. Sometimes the loss wasn't outright destruction, but a form of hidden knowledge. Astronomical techniques or specific interpretations might have been considered state secrets passed down through a very select few, never committed to widely accessible texts. This exclusivity, while perhaps intended to protect imperial power, also made the knowledge vulnerable to being lost if the lineage of experts was broken. It was like a very exclusive cosmic club, and if the club disbanded, all its secret handshake knowledge went with it. A mainstream historical fact, the burning of the books and burying of scholars during the Qin dynasty, 221 to 206 BCE, under Emperor Qin Shi Huang, is a prime example of deliberate intellectual destruction. While primarily targeting philosophical texts, such events often had a ripple effect, leading to the loss of various scholarly works, including potentially astronomical ones. Later, during dynastic transitions, the records of the defeated regime were often viewed with suspicion or contempt, and might not have been diligently preserved, leading to further gaps in historical and astronomical continuity. It's a sobering reminder that knowledge is fragile, especially when intertwined with political power. Now for a quirky tidbit, there are tantalizing hints in surviving texts of complex instruments or sophisticated observational methods that are only vaguely described, leaving modern historians to piece together their workings like ancient cosmic puzzles. Imagine reading a cryptic reference to a cloud-piercing tube or a star-spinning mirror without any clear diagrams or detailed instructions. It's like finding a recipe for a truly amazing dish, but half the ingredients and all the cooking instructions are missing. Historians still argue whether the loss of these records has significantly hampered our understanding of the true sophistication of ancient Chinese astronomy, or if enough has survived for us to form a reasonably complete picture. Was there a vast trove of lost knowledge that, if discovered, would fundamentally alter our view of their astronomical achievements? Or are the gaps more about detail than about revolutionary concepts? You're a historian piecing together fragments of a cosmic story, knowing that many pages have been ripped out, and you're left to wonder what celestial wonders they described. The night sky hides its secrets well, and sometimes so does history. So we've journeyed through millennia of meticulous observation, cosmic bureaucracy, and the awe-inspiring attempts of ancient Chinese astronomers to decipher the heavens. We've seen their ingenuity with omens and armillary spheres, their fascination with the 5 planets, their unique constellation systems, and their fear of the dragon devouring the sun. We've even peeked into their daily lives full of cloud frustrations and the pressure of imperial prognostication, and acknowledged the knowledge lost to time. But what does all this mean for us here now, under our own vastly different skies. It means that ancient Chinese astronomy, despite its unique cultural context and its focus on omens, holds a profound legacy, modern astronomy's ancient roots. You see, the work they did wasn't just for their emperors or their crops. Their tireless dedication to observation, their meticulous record-keeping, and their relentless pursuit of calendrical accuracy provided a foundational data set that still resonates today. When modern astronomers want to study long-term changes in stellar brightness or the precise timing of ancient supernovae to understand galactic evolution, where do they often turn? To those dusty, ancient Chinese scrolls. Their data wasn't just culturally significant, it was and remains scientifically invaluable. Imagine a modern astrophysicist working with cutting-edge telescopes and supercomputers, but still relying on a detailed record of a guest star from 1,000 years ago, carefully noted by an ancient Chinese official. It's a powerful connection across time, a testament to the enduring value of empirical observation, regardless of the initial motivation. They built a bridge from the unknown to the known brick, by observational brick, even if they sometimes called those bricks celestial omens. A mainstream historical fact, the ancient Chinese records of celestial phenomena, especially supernovae and comets, are considered the most complete and accurate in the world for their respective periods. For instance, the detailed accounts of SN 1054, which form the Crab Nebula, and Halley's Comet on numerous passes, are indispensable for calibrating modern astronomical models and understanding the long-term behavior of these objects. Without their meticulous notes, our understanding of these cosmic events would be significantly poorer. Now for a quirky tidbit, while Western astronomy famously began with figures like Aristotle and Ptolemy, emphasizing theoretical models, sometimes at the expense of observation, Chinese astronomy consistently prioritized detailed empirical observation. They just loved to write down what they saw, even if they didn't always have a neat theoretical box to put it in. It's like they were the ultimate data collectors, building a massive spreadsheet of the universe long before spreadsheets were even a twinkle in anyone's eye. This observational bias, born from pragmatic needs, unexpectedly gifted future generations with a treasure trove of data. Historians still argue whether the lack of a strong theoretical framework similar to that developed in Greece or later in Europe ultimately limited Chinese astronomy from transitioning into a more modern scientific discipline, despite its observational prowess. Did their focus on practical application and detailed recording prevent the emergence of a Kepler or Newton? Or was their approach simply a different path to understanding equally valid in its own context? It's a thought-provoking question, isn't it? You're looking back at thousands of years of human endeavor, realizing that our current understanding of the universe stands on the shoulders of giants from every corner of the globe, including those ancient stargazers of China. And so, as we bring our journey to a close tonight, you can drift off knowing that the very stars twinkling above you have been watched, charted, and pondered for countless generations. The quiet dedication of those ancient Chinese astronomers, their patient nights under the vast inky canvas, helped lay the groundwork for our own understanding of the cosmos. Their world was filled with celestial dragons and omens, but also with an unwavering commitment to seeing, to recording, to making sense of the dazzling, bewildering expanse above. Close your eyes now. Feel the gentle hum of the fan, the softness of your pillow. Let the images of ancient observatories and long-lost star maps fade into the quiet comfort of the night. The sky, whether seen through a gnomons shadow or a modern telescope, remains an endless source of wonder, a cosmic lullaby that has soothed and inspired humanity for millennia. Rest deeply knowing that the universe continues its silent, majestic dance just as it always has. Sweet dreams.